Before we call it a day on our discussion of intervals, there are a few more things you might like to know about. You're listening to Music Student 101. And now, your hosts. Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
You know, that last episode was kind of theory heavy, so I'm not sure about you, Matt, but today I myself am feeling kind of laid back.
Me too. I've been sitting over here making up chord progressions on your keyboard.
Do you like the new keyboard sound, the new piano sound?
I do. It's got a little bit more of a sophisticated, rich, kind of complex sample behind it, so...
Yeah, and if you listen to our MIDI episode, you kind of know what we're talking about. Up until recently, I've been using Contact. It's a sampling software. Who makes that? Native Instruments.
Native Instruments.
That's right, yeah, Native Instruments. So yeah, Native Instruments makes this software called Contact, and we've been using the grand piano for that.
Yep.
And then I recently got this new software as a part of an upgrade package for Pro Tools. Just got it for free, called Addictive Keys. And we're just trying it out today. It's the Grand Piano Studio Grand Sound.
I love free stuff.
I do too. And I think it really does have a pretty good sound. We'll have to go back and compare them later on.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. But anyway, maybe you'll hear more of that. We're always trying to upgrade and improve our production value here at Music Student 101.
Trying to improve listener experience all the time.
Uh-huh.
You know, for everything from new samples to more caffeine in your hosts.
Yeah.
You know?
Cold brew, baby. Quick and easy. Back in November, we talked about intervals. We kind of, back in November and October of 2016, early on in this podcast, we began talking about intervals in theory and in ear training.
Right, yeah.
Now, really, there's not a lot of time spent on intervals, in the typical curriculum. Am I correct?
Yeah, they're a big deal when you first start doing ear training. And then at some point, it's kind of assumed that you're going to learn your intervals and then move on to other stuff. Some people succeed at that whole moving on thing better than others. There are a lot of people that never really get the hang of intervals. Not because they're not as good at this kind of stuff as other people or anything like that, but probably just because they didn't really have a chance to work it out in their own time.
Yeah.
And then, problems kind of creep up later.
Right. And actually, I don't want anyone to get discouraged because even though I'm a podcaster and educator and whatnot, you'd think I'd just be this Einstein of ear recognition by now, right? But the fact of the matter is I'm taking vocal lessons. And it turns out that because I've been doing folk music for a long time and just kind of standard rock, I've had some problems with my intervals as far as singing intervals.
Oh, sure.
We did this piece called Close Every Door from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I think that's the full title. Either way, it involved, especially on the cadences, a whole lot of, for me, uncharted melodic ideas, and a lot of harmonic minor resolutions.
Right.
And I found that to be very challenging. So he said, well, let's try some ear training. And of course I said to myself, well, I've done plenty of ear training, this should be a snap, right? But
folks, you will never be done with ear training.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Never will you be done with ear training. My students all the time, especially once they get to ear training 4, like, hooray, we passed, we're done with ear training. And I tell them all the time, no, you're not. No, you're not. Nobody's ever really done with ear training. This is a lifelong process. It's one of those use it or lose it kind of things.
It seems so.
Even if you're using it and thereby ostensibly not losing it, there's still parts of it you're going to be better at, and places that you're going to need to work on ear training wise. This is true for everybody.
Okay.
It's true for you. It's true for me. It's true for everybody. Teaching ear training has actually helped me a lot.
I imagine.
Yeah. Just because, for one thing, it forces me to practice it every day. which is the one thing that I can be bad at. But yeah, it's something you're never really done with it. You practice it all your life, and there's always little challenges and things that creep up.
Right. And I guess today we're going to kind of cover some of those things.
Yeah.
And maybe have a little bit of an extension to our prior discussion, because we might touch on some things like compound intervals and
yeah, right. A little chance for, if any of you out there, as we were thinking maybe you were sort of saying but at the end of some of our previous ear training, we'll try to tackle some of those buts, I guess.
Yeah. Well put.
Hey, so butt number 1.
Okay, well, actually, just to be nice, why don't we real quickly go over the basic intervals all within the same one octave?
Good plan.
Just to kind of refresh.
All right.
Unless you're binge listening, this has been a while.
Yeah, unless you're binge listening, this has been... And even if you are binge listening, this has been quite a few episodes back.
You've absorbed a lot of stuff between now and then. Go to sleep.
Yeah, go to sleep. We can pick this up in the morning. Okay, so... quick, the basic intervals, what we call simple intervals.
Yes.
Intervals an octave or smaller. So we start with a 1, and there is such thing as a perfect unison, whereas just if 2 instruments were playing the same note, if a piano and a guitar, for example, were playing the same note, then, we would call that a P1, a perfect unison.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it on the piano alone, obviously, but...
Because that note is already occupied.
Right, but that is technically a thing. But then the next one up from that is our minor second. Everybody kind of remembers that as the Jaws theme, right? Right?
They really sting when hit together.
Yeah, sting really bad. Yeah, and then there's the major second.
That's one that I had trouble with.
Really?
Believe it or not, major second.
Oh, wow,
He would play a note and say, while I'm playing this note, sing a major second. And man, I had trouble with it. I really did.
Just sing up the major scale, because it's just the next note up. Oh, man. Yeah.
I would intend to do that, but I found myself singing up the Phrygian scale or the Locrian scale. Yeah.
Okay. So just the next note up the major scale,
Yeah.
The next interval we have is the minor third. Which would be the next note up a minor chord arpeggio, if you sang those in choir class. Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And can you play them together?
Yeah, so minor third. Next one will be the major third. And this is just a sound you're going to get in your head at some point.
I do the same kind of approach with the arpeggio.
Yeah.
Like in the shower, which is when you sing, right?
Which is where you sing, right?
I'll try and do it. I'll try and hit a major arpeggio, and then with the same root after that, hit the minor arpeggio.
Yeah.
There's another weak spot for me is if like I said, if 2 guys are singing root over here and then fifth over here, and I'm the guy who has to do the third. Again, I think I mentioned that before, but that's kind of another weak point.
Scary, yeah. Scary thing to do, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good place to practice.
Indeed.
So, yeah. This is just a sound that needs to be in your ears, and with enough practice, it will be. Perfect fourth, it comes next, and this is the Here Comes the Bride, right? Mm-hmm. You can also think of it as going from scale degree 5 up to scale degree 1. So in sort of a theory explanation, a harmonic practice, it's right? From there we have what is alternatively known either as the augmented fourth, the diminished fifth, or perhaps most commonly as the tritone.
Yeah.
Didn't really play a very huge role in music until the 20th century. At least not by itself.
Yeah.
It is the make sure I'm saying this right. It is the interval that is so important to a 7 chord, right? So like, well, it is also it's also in a 5/7, and it is also the first opening notes of either the Leonard Bernstein song Maria from West Side Story, right? It's also in a favorite, in a very popular and much beloved cartoon about yellow colored people that we all know and love,
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. And it also, people will say it sounds like French police sirens.
There is something very alarming about this interval.
Right, yeah. I've even read reports that say babies naturally cry in tritones to sort of stress out the mother and make her want to come take care of it.
I'm going to listen for that next time I hear a baby cry.
Yeah. I don't know if it's ever been conclusively proven, but it is one of those things that I've heard floating out there in the universe. So. Yeah.
Don't give it milk. Let it cry a little longer. I'm trying to see what kind of compositions can come out of this baby. One more thing about the tritone real quick. When you play them together, they don't have that same sting that the minor second had. I mean, there's a dissonance, and the important thing is the dissonance level because that's where you get the 5-to-1 kind of resolution.
Yeah, I think a lot of the dissonance level in the tritone is sort of. I think we've gotten used to it. I think we hear it so much in music today, like I said, because it's in when you play a 5/7 chord. That dissonance is there
Between the 3rd and the 7th.
Right, yeah, between the 3rd and the 7th. So I think, and 7 chords are just such a part of our lexicon at this point that that I think we just have gotten used to it.
Okay.
It for most of musical history, it was considered extremely dissonant.
They said the same thing about the perfect fourth way back when.
Yeah, the perfect fourth was actually considered a dissonance. Yeah, because it was unstable.
Until people got more used to it.
Yeah. And then moving on, the perfect fourth's inversion, the perfect fifth. To me, this kind of sounds like Roman music or something. Like not real Roman music, like cheesy TV Roman music. Yeah.
The Ben-Hur chariot races.
Kind of. It's also obviously the interval which all Western tonal harmonic music is built around. It's really discovering this interval is the key to everything.
Kind of a big deal.
In choirs that are learning to sing your arpeggios,
This note right here.
You'll get used to playing that pretty easily,
It's one of the most consonant intervals that isn't a unison or an octave, right?
Right, yeah. It is, in fact, the second most consonant interval. So it is the most consonant interval that is not the unison or the octave. And then there is the minor six, which is what's a good song for the minor six? I know the band Evanescence seemed to like this interval a lot back in the day.
We had an example on the last episode, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
There's just something I love about this interval. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Particularly when it resolves down to the 5.
Yeah. Which is kind of where it wants to go harmonically, is down that half step. The major six is, of course, My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, right? So. And it's also, you'll notice it's actually also, theory speaking, it's usually used sort of as a soul to me kind of thing. Yeah. So.
Hmm.
Yeah. Which is the way it's used in My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean.
Does it do that in the NBC jingle as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Huh.
Yeah.
Major 6.
Yeah. So yeah, and so that's the two things: My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean or the NBC jingle. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and then the minor seventh. If you guys remember Star Wars, or not Star Wars, if you guys remember Star Trek, the original Star Trek, or something like that. But this.
Yeah.
And you know, if you also if you hear chords this well, you know, those are the border notes in a root position 7 chord. Minor 7th, and then the major 7, which it's hard to ignore the desperate pull that has to try to resolve upward, right? You know, when you hear these two notes,
Yeah.
and you just almost can't help it. You want to hear,
Thank you very much.
yeah.
You know, the minor 7, that flat 7, to me is you know, it's like that Mixolydian mode, which is based on the the fifth scale degree, but at the same time, it doesn't have that urgency. It seems more stable.
Has a little bit less of that urgency.
And then you hear that major 7, you just know it's time to go somewhere.
Come on.
What are you doing? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, and then of course we end with the perfect octave, which is really the absolute most consonant interval possible. You know. There you go. If you want to hear us talk more about these basic intervals, we have that podcast back in the day that we did.
Yes, episodes actually, numbers 9 and 10.
Definitely check that out.
Yeah, because we talk a little bit about singing the major scale, using numbers and solfege. We get a little more deep into it.
Yeah. We talk about some strategies for hearing and distinguishing between those intervals and things, I think.
So that's a few minutes on the basic intervals.
Yeah.
Now let's dig a little bit deeper because I think after this episode I want to have said mostly everything we need to say about intervals, right?
So we're done with this after this.
Yeah. Won't you be glad?
Yeah, so, you know, get what you need out of it. Nah, we're kidding.
Nah, this is we love intervals here at Music Student 101.
Yeah.
But where do we go from here? I guess we just keep traveling a little further away.
Yeah.
Compound intervals.
Compound intervals. Well, we should probably take a second to explain what we mean by a compound interval. A compound interval is any interval greater than an octave. So, you know, we ended with our perfect octave. You know, if I was to take that top note, move it up a half step, we have this new interval, which is sort of the spread out equivalent of a minor second.
Yeah.
Right? It's got the same two notes as a minor second, but they're an octave apart. And so we will therefore call it a minor ninth.
Yeah. I feel like that sting is kind of gone, but it's still kind of there. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's just been stretched out a little bit. That original sting, the simple interval of a minor second.
You can hear the waves.
Yeah, taking that highest note, pushing it up an octave, gives us the minor ninth. Yeah, and so the minor ninth is sort of the compound interval partner of the minor second.
Okay.
Ditto the major ninth and the major second.
The major second sounds a lot more palatable as well.
Yeah, they're all going to sound a little more palatable just because of the way the overtone series works and the way frequency ratio works in sound waves and things. But because of sciencey stuff like that, anytime intervals get bigger, they tend to be, the dissonances are less noticeable, even if they're kind of still there.
Yeah.
Right. And as far as compound intervals go, we kind of go up from there. Minor 10th.
So that's the actual third.
That's the actual minor third, yeah.
Okay.
And then the major third becomes a major 10th. Right? Yeah. And then, we can just keep going. Perfect 11th. Yeah. Augmented 11th or diminished 12th, but we still really just kind of call it a tritone.
Even with all those octaves in between.
Yeah. Perfect 12th. And expanded perfect 5th. Right?
I can get on board with that.
Yep, minor 13th, an expanded minor 6th, and major 13th and expanded major 6th. And then we have the major and minor 7th, which is a major and minor 14th. And then now we're 2 octaves apart with a perfect 15th.
So in my head, I said to myself, wait a minute, we're at 15. Why aren't we at 16? But then
Why aren't we at 16?
it came to me that, well, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, remember that there's only 7 notes in a scale.
Right. When we get to that 8, we're actually starting over. So
Yeah, when we're at 8, we're actually kind of starting over scale-wise, but
it folds in on itself.
Right, yeah. Kind of folds in on itself. So that's what we mean when we say compound intervals.
Okay. Ready for your question about compound intervals?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so I guess it's more of an observation.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got to that 15th,
Mm-hmm.
moving on from that,
Right.
we don't go to the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th.
Nah, not typically. Once you're talking about a compound interval, we just continue. We will just continue to call it, going on from that a minor 9th or major 9th or whatever. We don't really count the number of octaves. We just count whether it's smaller than an octave or bigger than an octave. And even sometimes we don't even do that.
Right.
I mean, sometimes we'll still call it major third, even though it's split by more than an octave. When we're being kind of lazy, we'll continue even doing that.
So on the 61 key keyboard, I'm seeing a very low C over there. Whoa. And then let's hear the most compound interval this keyboard can handle, right? So at 61 keys, that is 5 octaves.
Is it? Yes. So that would be a perfect 15th.
Let's hear a major 14th.
Oh, that's very Metroid-y.
Metroid?
You remember that game Metroid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So, but all that to say, what's happening here is a major 7.
Yep. You could call it a major 7th. You could technically call it a major 14th.
Hey, that's another good question. Does it make a difference?
It depends on context. It doesn't really always make a difference, but if you want to be completely technical, you could call that a major 14th. Like when you're analyzing something in theory, if you say a 5-9 chord, that's heavily implying not that there's a 5 chord with a second in it, but that you have gone up that octave.
Right. So compound intervals, there you go, right?
Yeah, that's what they are. How do we listen for them?
Yeah.
What I like to do, if I'm, compound interval, I like to take that bottom note, and in my head, imagine myself singing it up an octave. And remember that singing it up an octave is just sort of, it's more singing in a different range. It feels more like singing in a different range than like singing up a distance of notes, Think of it more as like switching from maybe your bass voice to your tenorish voice, or towards a falsetto voice or something like that.
Right.
It's more of a voice shift than it is singing up X number of intervals in terms of how it's going to feel, and how it's going to sound to you. So I like to, back to our compound interval, I like to imagine what that note sounds like an octave up, and then just do the same, sing from that octave up to the note.
Okay.
So,
and
and then my real top note is a third above that, right?
A third above that. Because you can talk. You can sing down from the third, right?
Right. Yeah, singing down a third until I hit that octave. So what compound interval are we looking at here?
Well, I would say that's a major 10.
That would be a major 10th. Yeah. Let's do another one. So.
Oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna try and do this process out loud. What I would be doing in my head, right?
Right.
So that lowest note, da, and then I bring it up an octave.
Yeah,
and then
close enough.
And then it's just a matter of finding that other note. So.
Yeah.
I can't sing that high.
You can't sing that high. So we have to imagine now.
We have to imagine. Well, to me, it sounds kind of minor 6-y.
It does sound very minor 6-y. In fact, before I did any of that, you could kind of hear that pull down to...
Yeah, it wants to go down.
Yeah. So, a lot of times, especially after you've done ear training a lot, you're going to hear lay sol as a big thing, right?
Lay being the flat 6 as opposed to la.
Right.
In the major scale.
So what are we playing here?
Well, I guess we just have to do a little bit of math and figure out what the next step
just do your math. So that's a minor 13th.
So the 9th would be the 2nd chord, 10th would be the 3rd, 11th would be the 4th, 12th would be the 5th, 13th would be the 6th.
Yeah. So for a lot of these, especially the ones that are diatonic to either the major or minor mode, these will be they'll have those melodic connotations to them. Those sort of real music kind of connotations. To the ones that are less like that,
Here we are.
And then
It's pretty high. I can probably sing higher in my head than
yeah, you can probably sing higher in your head, yeah. Or, right?
Yeah, I did notice though that whole thing wanted to go up.
Yeah. And so just for technical purposes, we're doing a tritone here,
Yes.
right? A compound tritone, compound diminished 12th. You probably heard that it wanted to go up. Yeah. So you're going to hear that it's going to want to go up. The way you kind of heard that a minor 6 kind of wants to go down.
Mm-hmm.
That's great when you can hear that. Make sure you know what it wants to go up and down to. That'll be as important in determining what interval you're hearing as anything else.
Right. It's almost like you're kind of imagining what is to come.
Yeah, almost kind of imagining what is to come. That's probably a valid way to try compound intervals. If the whole imagining the bottom note and octave up thing isn't working for you, it might be easier to just and then try to figure out where that wants to go. Then again, that's a hard one though, because that's a minor 14th, so it doesn't really want to go anywhere. Real.
Yeah.
But sometimes at least. You can sort of even maybe try singing down the scale. I landed on tonic pretty quick. So that must be a major 9th rate.
Yeah.
Right?
That 2 wants to go down to the 1, huh?
Yeah. So there are a couple of little tricks there. As with all ear training things, pick the process that gives you the best results, you personally the best results, and stick with it.
Yeah. Let's have a quick discussion.
On
where certain scale degrees have a tendency to go. Like we said, I feel like 2 wants to go to 1, right?
Right, yeah.
3 is pretty stable where it is because...
Part of a tonic chord, so yeah, fairly stable where it is. Although, I tell you, I have gotten in my head this sort of...
Yes.
Sort of with the majors there. That just... I hear a third and I sing down the scale almost naturally now, and that's just a common thing for me. But I find it's very helpful for me to help me recognize thirds.
It does seem to want to go down to that root rather than go back up to the fifth.
Yeah.
You know?
It wants to do that too. Like you said, it's pretty stable in itself. This is just singing down to that root is a personal thing I've developed.
That's cool.
And I recommend personal things.
Well, that has actually helped me out though considerably.
Yeah.
So, and then the 4, I think, wants to go back down to the 3rd, typically, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, this is a very classic kind of motion here. I think so.
Was that a 5-7 to 1?
Yep.
Or 5 to 1 or something?
Yes, that was 5-7 to 5-7 to 1.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So that 4 just wanted to drop down to the 3.
Yeah, it's even a very common kind of suspension to talk about to give it a foreshadowing of an upcoming or maybe already had.
I think actually we will have released non-chord tones by now.
Okay, so yeah, so it's oh, sorry.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
Suspensions, yeah, 4/3 suspension. So, yeah, you also hear the 4 going up to 5. Especially like in the bass line. That's a real common bass line, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
So and then we move up. And then we can move on to the 5, which
goes to 1.
Yeah,
right?
that's all
It's got a real tendency to want to move to 1.
More so in the bass, or
definitely more so in the bass.
Okay.
You can fool it by moving to 6 or something. But
fool everyone.
Yeah. But I think it's fair to say that most people, when they hear 5 in the bass, they immediately think of it going to 1.
Very cool.
Not that it can't do other stuff in actual music, but we're talking about tendencies, right?
Yes. And I think this also helps to identify the notes if you kind of have an idea of where they're going to go. That helps me out. So
a minor 6. That scale degree 6 definitely wants to resolve down to 5. Same thing for the major 6. It's maybe a little bit less of a pull, but that tendency is still there. Again, not that they can't do other things, not that you can't totally, do that on a major 6. It happens, but out of context, its tendency is to kind of want to move down to 5.
Can I hear a minor 6 moving down and then a minor 6 moving up real quick?
Yeah, so minor 6 moving down. Minor 6 moving up. Little harmonic minor motion there, up the harmonic minor scale, right?
Yep. Killer.
Yeah. And then major 6, going down. And then major 6 going up. So up a major scale that time. Or up a melodic minor scale. Yeah.
That's the 6th.
Yeah. The minor 7, remember that this is also a dominant 7, so it just kind of depends. If you're in a dominant chord, it's going to want to resolve downward. In other contexts, like in a mixolydian mode or something, it can be fairly stable / want to resolve up to tonic. It's hard to pin a real strong tendency tone on the minor 7.
Yeah.
Other than in the context of a dominant chord, it's going to want to resolve downward.
Yeah.
Major 7 definitely wants to resolve up to that octave.
Yeah, it's a big difference. So. Hey, for the 7th, can we do compound for just for giggles and?
Yeah, let's do compound.
For
so,
7th.
Minor 14th. Yeah. And like I said, this is kind of hard, right? There's not a lot of tendency tone motion either way. If you're imagining this though as a dominant 7, then it definitely wants to resolve downward.
Yeah.
Right? Because then it's scale degree 4 going down to scale degree 3. right? Yeah, so that's the minor 7th / minor 14th. And then the major 7th, of course, is definitely wanting to, right? Yeah. So
That makes perfect sense now. But I do remember my struggles early in theory with the major 7 versus the minor 7, and it just goes back to being able to project the next note to come.
yeah, ear training takes a lot of mental ability. I think a lot of people get kind of frustrated when they think, well, I'm supposed to just hear this and know, right?
Yeah.
But there's a mental process going on in figuring it out,
The more you do it, the smoother the paths those neurons are.
Yeah,
firing
exactly. And if you do that enough, it will come to a point where you can figure it out really fast enough that it seems like you're just looking at it and knowing, I mean, when you're reading words, you're not having to sound them out anymore, in your adult life, right?
Yes.
But when you first started, you had to kind of, sound out every letter and things like that to help you learn. And we were all learning.
And because we were so cute, those were joyous times for our parents.
Yeah.
But now that we're older, it can be kind of frustrating for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's talk about some of these kind of enharmonic namings, if that's the proper way to say it.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
For example, we may have mentioned in passing the diminished octave at one point.
Right.
Which we actually just kind of covered, didn't we?
Yeah, it's kind of what interval is that, Jeremy?
Well, it sounds to me like the major 7.
Well, it should. It is the major 7th. We call that enharmonically equivalent. It's the same 2 notes as in a major 7th. It's just, an octave in which the top note has been dropped down. So in that sense, it is a diminished octave.
Now, is there different scenarios where we would use the term diminished octave compared to the major 7? Because I don't think I've ever heard the term diminished octave.
Diminished octave is kind of a rare one,
Uh-huh.
to be honest. There are places where you would use the term, for example, augmented second. When we're running up a harmonic minor scale, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Those last couple of notes. This is actually a minor 3rd, right?
Yeah.
But its equivalent is an augmented second. We call that so to point notice to the fact that this major second that is common, has actually been raised. Right? So whereas natural minor, major second, right? That second has become augmented in harmonic minor.
Because if you're moving within a scale, it's all it's basically seconds.
It's all seconds. You got to sort of
seconds.
account for the fact that you have one of every note name, right?
If a 3rd comes up, you typically think you're in some kind of triad situation.
Yeah, and you typically think of yourself as having skipped a note in the scale, right? Yeah.
So that's why, in context of the scale itself, we're calling this an augmented second instead of a minor 3rd.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Absolutely.
Great. Oh, is there a time? If you're doing like a chord progression, is there a time where the same major 3rd, depending on the progression you choose, might resolve up instead of resolving down? Something like that. You know what I mean?
Possibly. Possibly. You would. We tend to want to call intervals simple things.
Huh.
So if it's a major 3rd, we want to call it a major 3rd.
Uh-huh.
Not
a diminished 4th.
Not a diminished 4th, right? You tend to want to call it a major 3rd. Now, if it's written as a diminished 4th, then I guess you kind of have to call it diminished 4th.
Mm-hmm.
That would be strange.
Yeah. You don't see a lot of that.
No, you don't see a lot of that. We tend to try to keep things simple this way.
That satisfied my curiosity, I would say.
Good.
Here's kind of another thing about intervals that I don't think was really touched on a whole lot in ear training.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like a lot of the ear training that we do, I think for our students,
right,
we kind of use that mid-range of the piano.
Yeah.
Now, let's listen to a major 3rd right there in the middle of the piano. Now let's hear the lowest possible major 3rd you can give me. Kind of muddy, right?
lot muddy. And if your piano's out of tune, that's where it's going to be out of tune. It's going to be even worse, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people have issues with really low or really high.
Yeah, it's almost.
This is just a matter of practice.
Uh-huh.
I would practice these lower intervals, and it's just the same strategy. Sing the bottom note, sing the top note, and then use that to determine the interval.
Nice.
Yeah.
Give me one.
Give you one, huh?
Closing my eyes. Ooh. Huh. Is that just a major second?
It is just a major second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So how did you get there?
I squinted and I furrowed and I burned a lot of brain cells. I don't know. No, I mean, I don't know.
Burned a lot of brain cells. Does it sound like the first two notes of a major scale?
That must have been it.
Or did it sound like, to me, it actually sounded like flat 7 to 1. Like.
Let's hear that same example on the extreme high end.
That same example, or do you want a new one?
Different example.
Let's give you a different example.
Hit me.
All
right, one more time. There's something very consonant happening here.
Yes. So you heard that consonant.
I did, even on that way high end.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a perfect fifth?
Very, very close.
Perfect fourth.
Yeah, there you go. Easy to mix those two up. This is a common mistake. Sing sol do, and then sing do sol, and one of those is going to sound more right than the other, right? So even up here, or do sol. Which one sounded?
The first one. I think sounded right.
So sol do is a perfect fourth.
Okay.
Do sol is a perfect fifth.
But if you had done that in the middle of the piano, I don't think I would have had the same struggle that I just did.
Oh, probably not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a perfect fifth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, versus.
Mm-hmm.
But those are very, very. Don't beat yourself up too bad when you miss a perfect fourth or a perfect fifth. Those are hard.
Especially in the extreme ranges.
Everything is harder in the extreme registers. The same techniques and strategies still apply. It's just all more difficult and takes more practice.
I wonder if that has something to do with, how like the electric guitar playing lead and the cello, how beautiful.
Right.
And they're kind of in that range of the human voice,
Yeah.
And I think that we evolved to kind of be more sensitive to the things that are in the range of our vocal.
Yeah, we have a lot more experience communicating in those ranges, And music is kind of a language unto itself,
So you don't hear as many songs that are just that's just bass. Unless you heard our opening.
Well, yeah, unless you heard our bass episode. But even then, I was up the upper end of the bass.
Way high
and you were
on
at the lower end, right?
Yeah. So that's just one other little thing that I think is worth mentioning because I don't think a lot of attention was given to it when I was in school. But I think that the only solution to familiarizing yourself with these is just sit there at a piano or any kind of MIDI instrument that can produce those lower notes.
Yeah,
or higher
and
notes.
A lot of ear training software will randomize the range, and that's good.
That's very good. Yeah, we
didn't do that enough when we were given. We were assigned, or at least in my ear training class, we were assigned McGammett.
Yes.
To do, and we probably didn't do enough of it.
Yeah. I got just the amount of hours I was supposed to get.
Oh yeah, me
too. I wasn't
me
sitting
too.
down.
And then I was done. Yeah. Well, it's frustrating. It is frustrating to do this. You don't have that passion most people towards ear training that they do to their instrument, and yet it requires almost as much practice and almost as much dedication. I think you really have to kind of get out in the world a little bit and really understand what a significant benefit it is to be able to hear these things when you're playing music or even just listening to music. You have to get out into the world and hear that enough and get to the point in your life where it's like, I wish my ear training was better to really start to appreciate why we're putting you through this,
What would you say to a musician who plays just a monophonic instrument, like a whistle, for example, or a flute, who alone can't really experience the harmonic intervals?
I would say intervals are extraordinarily important to you because as a melodic instrument, all you're playing is a sequence of intervals, right?
Yep. Yeah. But I think that they're going to have an easier time, I think, distinguishing melodic intervals than harmonic intervals, don't you?
Probably, maybe? Yeah. That's not an excuse.
That's not an excuse.
I mean, if you're playing any melodic instrument, you are going to be playing with people who are creating some kind of harmony.
Correct.
You're going to want to understand what they're doing.
Yeah. Because
that will enable you to be a musician and not just a person playing an instrument.
Hey, well put, man.
Yeah.
Well
so
put.
You'll be able to contribute to discussions about the harmony. You'll be able to have thoughtful feedback and insightful and valuable opinions about what's going on, what could be going on that's better, such things like that.
Where your part is in the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things, it's difficult to put into words the value of this stuff. You just have to go out and, you'll get there. You'll get to that point where you wish your ear training was better if it's not as good as you want it to be, right? If it's not at a certain level, you'll get to that point.
Hey, I have a recommendation. I have something we can try if we're just monophonic melody players like a flute or a whistle. Why don't you in your head sing a harmony? Or not in your head, but actually, like Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull.
Right, yeah.
He did some really cool kind of stuff where he would actually be singing doo, 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 like while he's playing, and actually playing something different than what he's singing. So essentially, there is a harmony.
There's a sort of harmony going on. Yeah.
That might be kind of hard while you're blowing out air from your mouth to the whistle, and
sounds like an interesting technique.
The harmony's coming out of your nose.
Yeah. Sounds like an interesting technique.
I might not use this, but let me just see if I can kind of pull this off because I have my penny whistle here. So if I play, ooh, there's my D note. Ooh, if I try and harmonize on a note like a third,
there you go.
I was on the right track.
I
might can use that. I don't know. But there you go, harmony with a monophonic instrument.
There you go. Yeah, and even if you don't want to. Getting to doing that, remember that harmony is itself created from melody. That when four instruments play melodically together, that is how we create harmony. So you're a part of this. You need to understand what's going on.
And your role.
Yeah.
Very cool. The only other thing I might add to our discussion on intervals and some of the problems we run into is something I wish I mentioned in the other episode, the basic intervals episode, and I don't think I did. Or maybe I did, but either way, I'll say it again for emphasis, just in case. Most musicians write.
Yeah.
Right? Write your own compound intervals. Write a song that starts off the very first note in this piece that you write is the interval that you're having the most problem with.
Yeah. It's always a good thing. It's always a good way to get anything in your ears.
Once I've created something and I've played it and recorded it, sing along to it, it's in my head. It's my baby.
Yeah.
You love your baby.
I'll tell you, for me, a lot of these intervals that give me the least trouble are the ones that I know it's because I've used them.
Oh, yeah.
Like the minor six that, I know I have used that in compositions. So did other people who work for HBO, apparently. Right. All right, so.
Well, what else can we say about intervals, man?
I think it's pretty wrapped up at this point. Always practice them. Always practice your melodic dictation, in which intervals is a thing. Knowing your intervals will help you with your melodic dictation. Being good at melodic dictation will help you with your intervals. Back and forth. There's a back and forth there.
Yeah. And here's a mean thing to do to yourself from time to time. Play a note and try and sing a minor second above that while playing the same note. Now, that's easier to do than the
Yeah.
minor second.
Yeah.
Jeez, that was good, Matt.
Yeah.
Mean stuff to do to yourself.
Mean stuff to do yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. It just takes practice, just like everything else. And practicing those things it actually gets to be kind of fun after a while,
So we got basic intervals, we got compound intervals, we talked about some of the challenges within.
Yep.
If there's anything else you guys can think of that you want to know about intervals or questions that you have to ask, you know where to find us. info@musicstudent101.com.
All right.
We really want to thank all of our listeners for your support and your engagement. You can continue to help by spreading the word and rating us on your preferred podcast app.